It's typically evenings, typically from like
Hello.
4:30.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the University of Maine at Presque Isle for the distinguished lecturer this evening. My name is Vanessa Patnode, and I'm a professor here at the university. And I'm also a member of the Distinguished Lecturer Series Committee, and we are very excited about our presenter tonight. Before we get going with introductions, after the presentation there'll be a question and answer period at the back of the room when you're leaving, after we've all been inspired by what he has to say. His award-winning book is on sale. We can take cash and credit cards, I've been told. So I hope you enjoy this evening. I'd like to introduce now Barbara Blackstone. She is the chair of the College of Professional Programs and the College of Education.
I'll be brief, and I apologize for my extra deep voice tonight. Tonight's speaker is an award-winning author, professor, Fulbright scholar, and a thoughtful leader who will talk about his life's work, which focuses on high-level leadership, outstanding organizational performance, and cultivating a global-minded workforce for the 21st century. He is the founder of Roundtable Group, a consulting and training firm that specializes in leadership development workshops, and he's created a website designed to assess contextual intelligence. As an athletic trainer, for those of you who know, that's what I do too. He has worked with the USA track and field teams, and he leverages his experience with high-level elite athletes to bring a practical and real insight into the leadership development programs. Matthew Kutz.
Well, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. Does that sound okay? It's kind of echoey, but I probably won't stand behind here, so don't get offended if I'm moving around too much, but I suppose I'll start back here. Find my, see if I can get this thing working. Here we go. There it is. Find my mouse. Here we go. All right, so here we go. So that's my family. Two things you're going to find out pretty quick. I was a little nervous when they invited me to do a distinguished lecture, because you'll find that it might not. I mean, distinguished, I don't know. We'll try to we'll try to make it distinguished, I suppose. But I'm more of a talker, and we'll just hopefully interact with you guys a little bit and get some things. And then the lecture part might not really be a lecture in the traditional sense like you think of in a classroom, but I'm going to talk to you guys and tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about what I'm doing. This picture was taken in Rwanda. I spent the better part of 2013 living and working in Rwanda as a Fulbright scholar, teaching in the University of Rwanda College of Medicine and Health Science, teaching in the physical therapy department. Taught athletic training, and my background is athletic training. That's what I am. That's what I was trained to do. So, and I love that profession. Athletic training. We're the folks that when an athlete gets injured or they get hurt, run out onto the field, do the injury evaluation and diagnosis, set a treatment plan, a rehabilitation plan, and a lot about leadership, or what I've learned about leadership, I've learned from being an athletic trainer, in terms of just how to respond to uncertainty. You never know when a disaster or some kind of tragic event is going to happen, so you've always got to be ready. And a lot of those lessons that I've learned with athletes, I try to put over into my leadership. So this, anyway, that's my wife Angie, my sons Nathan and Jonathan, and this was a publicity photo for House Hunters International. So we were on House Hunters International. And I promise this is a family-friendly story, but this first story is a little funny. I am forever known by, if you've ever seen the episode, well, I'll tell you this way. About a year and a half ago, my wife were at a restaurant on our date night, and we're sitting at Max and Irma's. It's like a hamburger joint. We're just having our date night, and talking and carrying on, and some guy walks by the table on his way to the restroom, and looks at the table and looks at us, and kind of, there's this little slow down shuffle walk thing, and kind of looks at us and goes to the bathroom and comes back out of the bathroom and walks by and slow down, shuffles, and looks us over and walks halfway back to his table, stops, comes back, starts wagging his finger at me. He's like, "Are you the two-person shower guy?" And my wife starts laughing. It's like, yeah, I shook my head of shame, went down. It's like, yes, I'm the two-person shower guy. I am forever known in my students, my community, as the two-person shower guy. And I get recognized in the street for being the two-person shower guy, because when you watch the episode, you'll see, if you've ever seen it, you walk into these different houses, and we walked into the first house that we looked at, and I headed towards the master bedroom, and my wife headed towards the kitchen. So I'm walking to the master bedroom, and walk by the bathroom, stick my head in the bathroom, and they have a huge shower in there. So I yelled down the hallway, "Hey, Ange, the shower is big enough for both of us at the same time." just goofing around, and you know, so that's the sound bite that they decided to use for all the cutaways, all the segues, all the commercial cutaways, and so now I'm known as a two-person shower guy. So that's my claim to fame on TV. So that's what I say, we're going to get a distinguished lecture tonight. I'm not sure how distinguished it's going to be, but we lived in Rwanda. I taught there, and I've had just an incredible opportunity to do a lot of things. I've lived in Rwanda, I've been to Tanzania and Uganda and South Africa and Ireland and China, and going to Australia this next summer. I've got a visiting scholar opportunity. I'm going to take the family to Australia for a semester and live there and teach there. All teaching this concept of contextual intelligence, which is what I wrote that book on several years ago. Basically, the idea, and that's what we'll talk about tonight, is a big part of the book is about navigating uncertainty, being comfortable with ambiguity, and how in today's economy, in today's marketplace, one of the most essential skills you can have is being comfortable with complexity and ambiguity. And it really is, the world has changed dramatically from what it once was to what it is now. And that it becomes a fundamental skill. It's kind of a funny story how that even came into being, that idea, because I was, as I mentioned, an athletic trainer. So my research interests and my scholarly activity tends to revolve around biomechanics, for example, and exercise physiology, and ankles and knees and injuries like that. And how does a guy with that background end up standing here talking about leadership? Well, what had happened is I took a job at a university in Texas, big university in Texas, and I never really had any research experience. My teaching up until that point was at a small university where we focused primarily on teacher education and teaching and not so much on research. So I arrived at this big university in Texas, and I was expected to start writing research, which I wasn't prepared for, and in hindsight was probably pretty grumpy about, because I liked the teaching part and hated and still don't care for the research part. But anyways, out of necessity of having to write something, I went to my dissertation and tried to spin off as many papers as I could out of my dissertation. My dissertation was about the leadership skills that you need to have when you change industries, change jobs, or change careers. What are the leadership skills that you take everywhere, and not versus the ones that are idiosyncratic to a specific industry or a specific job? I didn't want to know about those. I wanted to know about the ones that worked everywhere. So that's what I did my dissertation on, and I found out, and I came up with this framework, and it's really neat, and it's been published, and it's part of this book and all that, and it's really served me well. But I identified 49 behaviors that work everywhere, regardless of the setting, regardless of the industry, regardless of the context, regardless of all those things, and these 49 behaviors. And 49 behaviors are a lot of behaviors. That's a lot of things to look at. So it's really not a usable form of anything other than just to go on a dissertation. And I needed to get something useful out of it because my job was now on the line. So we did some more research and some other statistical methods, and we did what's called a factor analysis, and we ended up being able to take those 49 behaviors and organize them into 4 groups, 4 clusters of skills, much more usable, much more user-friendly. One of those groups was originally my miscellaneous pile, my miscellaneous skills. And the other 3 were very logical things that you would see in any business book, any management research things like communication, strategic intent, things like that. But I had this leftover miscellaneous pile that I needed to call something, and I really didn't know what to call it. So I looked at it and studied it and looked at other things, and I decided to call these behaviors when they're practiced contextual intelligence. So I wrote this paper on contextual intelligence based on these 12 leadership behaviors that theoretically, again, were supposed to work anywhere. And wrote the paper, submitted it, got published, and I was on my way towards tenure kind of thing, and just went back to the lab and started doing research on ankles and knees and stuff that I, was trained to study. And about 3 years after that, now I've left Texas, and now I'm back in Ohio at the University of Manitoba, Bowling Green State University. And I'm just in my office one day, and my phone rings, and on the other end of the line is an executive from a Fortune 25 company, one of the largest companies on the planet. The director of the Global Business Division, which was a $16 billion division within the company, was on the other line, and he said, "Hey, is this Dr. Kutz? Are you the guy that wrote that article on contextual intelligence 3 years ago?" I had to think for a second. Did I write an article? Yeah, I think I did, actually, kind of thing. And he said, I read it, loved it, put it down because I didn't want to overreact, waited 6 months, gave it to my team, came back again 6 months later, read it again, and said, "This is the best leadership article I've read. This is going to change the way the world does leadership." And I'm like, really? It is? I don't even remember talking about it all that much. And so that kind of snowballed into this huge event where they invited me to their global headquarters to talk to these people about, this idea of contextual intelligence. They really liked it. They wanted to put it in their corporate university and change. And it was just boom, 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 all of a sudden over. It was crazy stuff. And that's where I found I wrote, so anyways, they asked me to write a book just for them, a training book inside. So I did that. That's when I left for Rwanda. Came back from Rwanda, and I found out while I was gone that it actually won an award for Leadership Book of the Year, for an innovation and cutting edge perspective, and all this because of a dissertation finding that was kind of unexpected during this process. And since that time, of course, now one of the things that they asked me to do is, well, we want you to be able to measure this. I mean, this is a construct. You've got behaviors here. You've got a framework. You need to find a way to measure this, because if you can measure this, we can really do something with it. We can help our staff, help our teams, etc. So I developed a profile called the Contextual Intelligence Profile that goes along with it. And from that, that's where the China and the Ireland and the South Africa and the Perus and all these places come in. I started traveling all over doing talks on contextual intelligence. And it's just been a blast. And it's just been a blast because, again, the big take-home message about that is navigating uncertainty and navigating complexity. So that's what I want to talk about with us. Better turn this on. Talk about with us here today. So abandoning the status quo. One of the things that's really interesting about navigating the world that we live in today is that the status quo typically is what we operate from and how we operate out of. We like things that are routine. We like things that are set. We're comfortable with predictability. In fact, we build a life around the idea that things are predictable. I mean, we really like Sir Isaac Newton's concept of physics, for example, that things are predictable, they're orderly, they're structured, they happen in sequence. And that's great, except for the fact that that's just not true. In the world of physics, there are rules and, of course, things like that. But when you think about people and relationships and organizations in particular, that's anything but. Think of governments, for example. Anything but. So much of the constructs that we build, whether it be organizations, governments, politics, families, marriages, whatever, the organizations we work with, they defy those rules, physical rules of the universe. And that's just the way it is. Whether you like it or not, you can argue with me if you want, but you'd be wrong. It's because it's just not true. The world changes so quick, so fast, that unless we adapt and learn a set of skills that fits that, we're not going to be successful, or as successful as we can be. And this is what abandoning the status quo is about. We've got to tip the scales in the direction of disrupting the status quo. So what I'm going to really talk to us about today is, excuse me as I turn my back, which is rule number one you never do, about breaking the status quo and going into the status quo. So I just want to tell you, I've got three kind of goals for us this evening. The first thing is to talk about disrupting the status quo. The second thing I want to mention to us and try to walk away is rethinking chaos and what chaos is, and how hopefully by the time we're done you'll walk away understanding chaos is a good thing and how we can use chaos effectively. And then the third thing, and what I'm really most excited about, is to talk to you about how to walk in proper discernment for life. And I actually have a cute little acronym, and we'll go through all that, and what exactly means to discern life and the kind of mindset that we have to be discerning. So back to this status quo thing. The number one phrase that earmarks someone who is wrapped up in the status quo will say something like this: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I'm here to tell you, if it ain't broke, it's because you haven't messed with it enough. Okay? And that's really my fundamental philosophy, and that's really the cutting edge idea behind the idea of contextual intelligence. See, we've grown up in a world that has told us, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we develop models around that way of thinking. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's working, leave it alone. The problem is, if it's working, leave it alone, doesn't keep. It doesn't keep because something changes all the time, and that's the context. The context changes. The environment we're in changes. We might not change. You know, if you're a person of faith, you understand things might not change at all ever, and we talk about God never changes and all these kinds of things, but that might be true, but the world changes, the environment changes, the context changes, and as those things change, it becomes imperative that we see the world through a different lens, and that lens has to require abandoning the status quo, because if you keep doing the same things you've done before, when the context has changed, you're doing something wrong. You're doing something inappropriate. You know, an example I like to give with that is like raising my kids. So I've got teenagers, 2 teenage boys. And when they were 2 years old, I used certain techniques with them that worked for 2 years old. And that technique was, stop it or I'll kill you. Okay? Don't because I said so kind of thing. Dad said, you don't argue with a 2-year-old. You don't rationalize with a 2-year-old. You don't have a conversation with a 2-year-old. They're about ready to stick their hand in the fireplace to grab the log. You say stop or else, and if they keep trying, you spank their hand. And that's how you deal with a 2-year-old. And that was easy for me to do. I was good at that part. Well, now I've got teenagers. And I still say stop or I'll kill you, but that doesn't work like that anymore. They're totally different strategies, a different technique. See, I got used to doing something that worked really well, and my wife and I had a lot of stress when my boys were a younger teen. Well, they're still younger teenagers, but when they first started, retesting their boundaries and all that stuff again, we defaulted to what worked when they were 2. I'll give you a piece of gum, if you don't, kind of thing. Guess what? That doesn't work with a 16-year-old. He wants the car. And he's not getting that, kind of thing. And we kept using a strategy that was proven, a strategy that worked. It had history, it had precedent. I talked to other parents who thought that was also a good idea. They used the same thing. But I didn't change, but the context changed. The people around me changed. My kids changed. And I was the moron for not adjusting to that environment. So I had to change what I did in order to be successful. I had to disrupt or abandon the status quo. And that's really based in an idea, and I mentioned this Newtonian and non-Newtonian thinking. It's based in an idea of how we problem solve. Because we're raised, again, in a society that's mechanistic. And if I could do this illustration for you here. We really are raised in a society that's mechanistic. For example, what I mean by that is we think in terms of machines. We think the world is a bunch of component parts that fit together. We think in mechanistic terms, like an engine or some kind of thing like this, and we problem solve this way. We build these things together, and we think that these machines come together. We use metaphors. If you doubt this, we say things like, our organization is firing on all cylinders, our team is firing on all cylinders, or we're functioning as a well-oiled machine. You know, we use these kind of metaphors to illustrate things are going well. But there's something beneath the surface there. There's something else going on that's a world view about how we view problems and how we view situations. Because what we think is, or what we mean is, when I have an opportunity to evaluate, when I have a problem that needs to be solved, I can quite simply and easily isolate all the component parts, break them apart like a good accountant would, and break down assets and liabilities, and I separate them all out, and I can see all this. Well, simply, we just need to, like my wife will tell me, well, simply, we can just cut off cable. We don't have enough money, break it all down. We need money for this, so cable has to go. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I need cable. You know, it's not like that. It's not that simple. You can't isolate things out. You know, another example would be people who, they're not making enough money. I need a new job. I need a pay raise or whatever. So they get a new job. They get a pay raise. What happens? They're still broke. They're still in debt. They get a divorce. I need a new wife. My life stinks, so I get a divorce and get a new wife. Guess what? You're still a jerk. Okay? It didn't fix it. You know? So because life's not like these machines. We can't isolate and component, analyze things out, take the machine apart, find the broken piece, fix the broken piece, and put it back together. That's the consequence of a Newtonian-based worldview, very mechanistic. Organizations aren't like that. The relationships you have aren't like that. The people you work with aren't like that. They're more like Play-Doh. And this is what I call the Play-Doh principle. The Play-Doh principle says this: organizations are more like Play-Doh colors that have been mixed together. If you have 4 or 5 different colors of Play-Doh, for the sake of argument, let's just say blue and what's yellow and blue? Yellow and blue. You mix yellow and blue Play-Doh together, and I sit up here and I mash them together, I'm going to eventually get a green ball of Play-Doh. All the blue Play-Doh is still there, and all the yellow Play-Doh is still there, but if I asked you to give me the blue Play-Doh back, it can't happen. And this is what organizational life is like. This is what relationships are like. This is why getting a new wife doesn't fix your problem, because you're tied together, you're integrated together. This thing is there. You can't just take it apart and start over. Life's not like that. There's decisions you've made in the past, decisions you're making right now, decisions you're going to make in the future. We call that three-dimensional thinking, and that's another part of what I'll mention here in a minute. But it's so important to realize how integrated together these things are. And if you're not understanding that, then you're missing a big piece of navigating life successfully. So abandoning the status quo is one of the things you've got to embrace right away. You've got to start telling yourself, the way that I've always done it, even if it's working, can be better. I can do things better. I can do things faster. I can get a new idea if I put myself in the right situation. So how do you abandon the status quo? Well, you put yourself in different situations. You do things that you've never done before. And I know that maybe sounds trite or sounds simple, but it's actually profound. Because you've probably heard that 100 times in your life and you still haven't done it yet. We've got to put ourselves in situations that we've never been in before in order to get outcomes that we've never experienced before. We must. We have to. We're pushing that comfort zone. We all build this comfort zone around us. This idea of silos in organization, I believe, stems from this. So many organizations have a problem of siloing, and it's because people of like mind and like attitude, they hang together. They build their own ideas, their own resources, their own backgrounds, and they stay together instead of ever going outside of those things. So this is the Plato principle, and I think this is the number one thing that I would recommend for really beginning to disrupt the status quo. Changing the way you think about how you solve problems and how you evaluate opportunities. The list of pros and cons, sorry. I know I've got list people out there. I am a list person. Okay, this took me years to sink into myself because I'm a scientist. I have a lab, I do research, I am empirical method all the way through, observe, tested theory, hypothesis, the whole thing. That's what I do for a living. And to stand up here and tell you this, that ambiguity and complexity, it's like a cheese grater, in my soul. It's like, but I know it's true. And then you've got to really kind of embrace that. So you've got to put yourself in situations that you've never been in before, and you've got to reject the idea or the mantra that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or you've got to try to break it. And that's what I'm asking you to do. That's how you disrupt the status quo. Whatever it is that's working well, try to break it. It'll force you to think in new perspectives. It'll force you to see things in new ways. It'll force you to go outside of your comfort zone. Bring somebody into your world who you never would ask an opinion of before. And one of the things that I really wasn't planning on talking about tonight, but there's a guy named Peter Block. He wrote a book called The Empowered Manager back in the 60s. It's one of his best-selling seminal works. He identified this thing called the Agreement Trust Matrix. If I had a little board here, I could draw it out for you. You're going to have to imagine with me. I don't have a slide on it either. But the Agreement Trust Matrix says this: that every single person on the planet relates to every other single person on the planet in one of 4 dimensions. And that's how much they agree with them and how much they trust them. So I could have a high level of agreement and a high level of trust, a low level of agreement and a low level of trust, high agreement, low trust, high trust, low agreement. Okay, there are 4 boxes. And every single person you know fits into one of those 4 boxes. Now the thing that we do, talk about the status quo, the thing that we typically do more than anything else is we look for people in our lives who we agree with and trust. We call them allies. Okay, in that little box you put allies, high agreement, high trust. These are the allies in our lives because they empower our vision. They are our collaborative friends. They're the ones, they think like you do, they trust you, you trust them, which means that you believe they have your best interest in mind. That's what I mean by trust. You find somebody who you believe has your best idea in mind, or your best interest in mind, and you think the same way. And you hang around these people, and you ask them their opinion and their idea, and when they tell you something, you act like it's novel, but it's the same thing you've been thinking all along. Okay, those are allies. On the other side, on the other pole of that, is people who we don't trust and don't agree with. I don't believe you have my best interest in mind, and we think completely differently about life and everything else. That person's called an enemy. Okay? And we spend all of our lives avoiding these people. And matter of fact, enemies are the easiest people to deal with because we agree right up front. You don't like me, I don't like you, let's not talk. Deal. You go that way, they go that way, and problem solved. And ironically, when you do have to work with enemies, you actually are very cordial to them because you know that both of you have the same goal of getting out of there as soon as possible. The other 2 pieces, though, are what's really interesting because this is where we need to really begin to look at. The person who we have a high level of trust with and a low level of agreement. So I trust you. I believe you have my best interest in mind, but I don't agree with the word you're saying or word you're thinking. Now, in my world, I call that wife. That's what goes in that category. Yeah, fill in the box, wife. Okay? I know that you have my best interest in mind, honey, but we don't think the same way here at all. Now, in the way the matrix is supposed to read, it's an opponent. Okay? And opponents are people who add the most value to your life. Opponents are the people you need more of in your life than anybody else. And again, now remember what an opponent is. An opponent is someone you trust, and by that again I mean you believe they have your best interest in mind, but you don't think like they think. They're different. They have a different background, maybe a different political thing, maybe a different religion, maybe a different experience, a different background, whatever it might be. They just think differently than you do and have a different perspective of things, but you know otherwise they're generally a good person and they want to help you out. These are the people who challenge us. These are the people who get us to think things differently. I mean, imagine this for a minute. Imagine your enemy comes to you and tells you you're a total jerk. Okay, what are you going to do when your enemy tells you you're a total jerk? Tell them they're a total jerk back. So what? So are you. Leave me alone. And you walk away thinking, I'm nervous with that person. I can't believe that, you know. But when an opponent, someone you trust, your wife, who thinks differently, but you know has your best interest in mind, when they tell you, or your best friend, or somebody else, one of your other friends, you're being a total jerk. You're like, really? All right. You know, you might resist it at first, but eventually you get to, all right, what did I do? You know, and you think about it for a minute, you maybe apologize, but it causes you to contemplate and consider that. This is the value of opponents. Okay, they get you to see things in ways you haven't seen them before. So that's what we need now. There's one box left. And this is actually the most tragic box. Because the box that's left are people you agree with. People who think the same way as you, but you don't trust them. They don't have your best interest in mind. Now this is the box that we have most of. These people are most of the people in our lives. We think the same way. We have something in common that draws us together, but we only ever relate over what that common thing is. I don't trust you. I don't know if you have my best interest in mind or not. I think as soon as you got an opportunity, you're up and out doing something better, not thinking about me. But for the time being, we think the same way. It's like when I go to a ball, I'm a Detroit Tigers fan in the Detroit area. So we grew up Detroit Tiger fans. So my dad loved ball games. We went to a lot of ball games. And it's funny, every time I put on a Detroit Tigers shirt and drive up to Detroit, Michigan, I'm from Ohio, otherwise Ohio State and Michigan, we hate each other with a passion. Okay? But when I put a Detroit Tigers shirt on and go up to Tiger Stadium or Comerica Park, which it is now, and I'm walking in the gangway of the ball diamond, I'm getting high fives from total strangers, especially if we win. You know? And if my car broke down, and I'm in Detroit, mind you, if my car breaks down outside the ball diamond, and I've got a Detroit Tiger shirt on and my Detroit Tiger decal on, a total stranger I've never seen before after the game. Now, I didn't know the way it's going to happen, but if it was after the game, someone's going to pull over and help me. Total stranger, because we're buddies. We're Tiger fans. We're friends. We've got this in common. But as second as that goes away, I don't know this person. They don't know me. We're not friends. We're not relatives. Nothing like that at all. That's this fourth category. We agree, but we don't trust each other. That person is called a bedfellow. We want the same thing, but we don't know each other. Okay? Yeah, a little provocative too. Okay? That's really what it's called. Okay? That's what that is. And most of the people in our lives are bedfellows. We think the same way. We've got something in common, but as soon as that common thing goes away, the relationship ends. And we're heartbroken, upset, because we think we lost a friend, and really they were never a friend at all. They were a bedfellow. We had this thing in common, and I never took the steps necessary to advance this thing beyond that to begin to develop trust, because I had the false sense of community because we thought the same way. So that's called the agreement trust matrix. Every single person you know fits into one of those four boxes. Now what I would challenge you to do is not necessarily walk away asking yourself, all right, going to your list of people, which is what most people do, here's everybody I know, which box do they fit in? And what you need to do is figure out, here are the people that I know, what am I to them? And when you take it from that perspective, you really have some good information to start disrupting the status quo, because you'll start looking for advice from opponents instead of advice from bedfellows and friends. And when you start getting advice from real opponents, you'll start getting things that challenge you, that make you think differently, that take on a different perspective. And that's when you start making a difference. That's when you start becoming the person you want to be deep down inside. So that's just step one here. So the next thing I wanted you to kind of walk away with is this chaos thing. Chaos is the term chaos is an actual tragic the tragic word to use because chaos has a negative connotation to it. Okay? It was never meant to be that way. And the word chaos is actually an ancient word that meant to yawn. Not yawn, bored, I'm tired kind of yawn. But yawn is in a void, sucking in nothing. That's what chaos means. And from a scientific perspective, a scientific term, chaos is unrecognized pattern. Okay, that's fundamental. If you're taking notes, write that down. Chaos is an unrecognized pattern. It is patterned, which is completely contrary to our traditional understanding of chaos. Because when we think of chaos, we think of random. We think of disorganized. We think of confusion. That's not what chaos ever was meant to mean or imply. Chaos is simply something you have not recognized yet. This is why the phenomenon, or the statement, hindsight is 20/20, proves to be true. Because you really never see the pattern in something when you're in it, when you're close to it. But when you step away from it and look back, a couple years later, a couple weeks later, or whatever, you actually then see the pattern. Oh, that's why that happened. Or this organized after this, and this planned out, and it did work out okay. And when you're in it, though, it's never going to work out okay, is it? When you're in the middle of the problem, when you're in the middle of the situation, it doesn't tend to be that way. It's because we have a false understanding of chaos. If we recalibrate how we understand chaos, and when you're in the middle of your confusion, when you're in the middle of your turmoil, understand, you know what, this is gonna work out. My history tells me, life tells me, all that stuff. Eventually, this is gonna make sense. I just don't see it making sense right now. Know that, and counsel yourself in those situations that this is gonna work out. That's what I mean by embracing chaos. Understand that chaos is good. Chaos is valuable because you are going to learn something if you don't hate it when you're in it. And recognize it as a teachable learning moment. That's what embracing chaos is. Now, in order to do that, we have to introduce, we have to begin to see things that others can't and won't. Okay? So we have to use a new set of lenses. And I'm suggesting we use 3D lenses. Now, I use 3D lenses very intentionally because I want to introduce what is one of the main premises of my book on contextual intelligence is three-dimensional thinking. And I actually think this is what the cutting-edge idea was, by the way. Is this three-dimensional thinking involves hindsight, insight, and foresight converging together to inform your behavior, past, present, and future. Most of us default to one single time orientation when we have to problem solve, when we have to lead, when we have to evaluate an opportunity. And typically, for statistically speaking, most humans go to the past, hindsight. Okay, well, what happened last time? Or last time I tried this, this happened. Last time I said that, this happened, so never say that again. You know, we learn lessons from the past. Now, lessons from the past are a must. Okay? They're absolutely essential, but it's problematic if it's your main and single source of input. It can't be. We've got to learn to see in 3 dimensions and think in 3 dimensions. So the other 2 elements of time then are present and future. So what that means is when you're in a situation, when you're in turmoil, an opportunity, a good thing, bad, whatever, good or bad, and you think that, well, I'm here because a product of my decisions. I'm here because I really did well, I made a good choice, I made a wise decision, so I'm in this great position today because of that. Or I made some lousy decisions, some bad choices, and my life is in this predicament that I'm in because of the decisions I made yesterday and I'm here. That's only half the reality. Because there's another half to reality that has to do with the future, foresight. Because there's no way to get to the step that's in front of you except from the current step you're in now. So you can also think of that from the perspective of 3D thinking is about realizing that I'm not only here as a product of my past, but I'm here because of what I'm supposed to be doing tomorrow. And when we change that little shift like that and realize, yes, the past is important and it got me here, but just equally as important is where I need to be tomorrow, and I can't get there from any other place than here, because I can't get to there from that spot back here. I've got to be in this spot here. So now you're not just being pushed into your present, but you're being pulled into your present. And when you're pulled into your present, it changes your perspective. You know, there must be something that I need to do that's here. And it gives us a different sense of purpose, a different sense of meaning. And now the past, whether it was good or bad, also changes its value. And I can now, with that frame of mind, look at my past and say, that wasn't so bad, or that was necessary because, and I have a completely different perspective. And it changes the way you make decisions. It changes the way you see the world, and now you become valuable not only to your own goals, but to the people around you. Because when you can point that out to somebody around you, like your students, for example, in my case, they love you. And they see things that they've never seen, they recognize things they've never recognized, and all of a sudden you become the leader that you deep down inside really want to be. Somebody who influences people and gets them to go where they want to go. So we've got to see what others won't or can't see. I'll illustrate that for you in a second here. But anybody know who that is? Charles Dickens. Okay? So Charles Dickens was one of the best he's an ugly guy, wasn't he? That's why I put the glasses on. Charles Dickens illustrates this point maybe perfectly for me. And it's funny because I've been teaching this for 8 years now. And it wasn't only until last Christmas that I realized it's a family tradition in our house to watch The Christmas Carol. And Ebenezer Scrooge, you know The Christmas Carol. You've seen the story. It goes from Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas yet to come. And I'm sitting there thinking, I thought I had an original idea. You know? And you realize nothing's new under the sun. But anyways, this idea of Ebenezer Scrooge says, after he goes through this whole experience, I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me, and I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Again, after he has this experience, he wakes up and he says that. And because of that insight that he had, it changed the way he lived life. And he became, if you remember the story, the best old man the town had ever seen, kind of thing. It changed who he was fundamentally because he stopped thinking only, in his case, only about the future. Will there be enough? I've got to have enough. I've got to save. He was so future-minded that he didn't do anything at all right now in reality until he came to realize, listen, life isn't about just a one-dimensional reality. There's a three-dimensional reality, past, present, and future, that we have to embrace. And I'm asking you, put those glasses on and see that picture. Let me ask you this question. Here's how that works. By the way, it's a powerful illustration. If I were to ask you, where are you at and what are you doing when you have your most creative ideas? The ideas that you get excited about, the thoughts and the things that you get excited about, where are you at and what are you doing?
Wake up in the middle of the night.
Shower. Middle of the night. I get those two. I get 4 answers every time. And an occasional fifth, which is in the car. So 2 of them, so far we're 3 for 3. There's 2 more. On a walk, on a little bit of exercise, something like that, or on the toilet. Okay? I'm serious, very serious. Okay? I've given this little survey literally to thousands of people across the planet. Every time I get those responses. In the shower, on a walk, in the car, in bed, or on the toilet. What's interesting about that, never once has anybody said at work, when my boss is paying me to have good ideas and to solve problems. We never get that. We never have that. Never has that happened. Now the answer to that, why does it? Because that totally intrigues me. So I begin to look at this, and this is where this idea of 3D thinking. Think about what you're doing when you have these great ideas. I ask people this, and I'll say, okay, what are you thinking about when you're on the toilet or in the shower? Okay, whether it's one person or 2 people. Okay? Sorry, I had to throw that in. What are you thinking about? Okay, you're thinking of, and people will tell me nothing. I'm not thinking about anything. And they're actually completely wrong because it's in those moments they're thinking about everything. They're not thinking about nothing, they're thinking about everything. They're remembering what they did 3 years ago, which reminds them of something they want to do tomorrow, which reminds them about the work list and the to-do list, which reminds them, oh, I'm at work because I wanted to take this vacation with my family next year, so I'm saving for that. Next year's vacation thoughts remind you of a vacation you took when you were a kid, which reminds you about something your dad said to you yesterday, which reminds you about this. And you're back, and you are in That's what you're thinking about. You are in past, present, and future mode. All the files in your brain, your past files, your future files, and your present files are all open. And you're jumping back and forth from file to file, file to file, and you're drawing from a set of experiences that you haven't narrowed down to what you think is relevant. Because when we problem solve, we go to a relevancy folder. And we think about a particular folder only. And we realize, no, you could be all over the place. And that's when this great idea strikes you, this great insight, this creative idea. And that's also why you don't remember 20 minutes later. Because you think, oh, that's a great idea, I need to file that in my work file. So you close all the files down, and you go open your work file, and you're like, what was that memory? What was it? It was lost in translation. And you shut down those other files and open up another file. This is also what they call whiteboarding or blackboarding or white space. It's an aspect of embracing chaos. Well, I can't organize my thoughts that way. Yeah, actually you do, and that's when you have your best thoughts. That's when you have your most creative thoughts, when you allow yourself 3D thinking time. When you're just thinking about nothing but thinking about everything. You have to allow that in your day. If you do not allow that in your day, you are short-selling yourself and the people around you who are depending on you for solutions and answers and problems. That's 3D thinking. So that's what we need to do. Let me move on before I run out of time here. So we teach that with Plato. Plato said it this way: a pilot must of necessity pay attention to the seasons, the heavens, the stars, the winds, and everything proper to the craft if he is to really master the ship. You just can't focus on one thing. You've got to look at so many different things. This leads me to my next idea of what it means to have a discerning mind. And this is what I'm most excited about. This is something that is new. My next book is actually going to be discerning leadership. And we talk about what does the discerning mind understand that a non-discerning mind does not understand. And I want to illustrate what a discerning mind or discerning thinking thinks about that non-don't. And I illustrate it by these four things here. The discern part. They understand that the world is complex. They understand that the world is enigmatic. They understand that the world is rapid, and they understand that it's nuanced. And each one of those four things is fundamental understanding to truly take in and thrive and navigate in a world that we need to navigate in. So let's break down these things one at a time. So complex. I learned this lesson this way. Okay, Harvard Business Review talks about complexity and how important it is. You can't pick up a magazine, a journal article, academic or popular in the last 2 years that doesn't in some wise talk about how complex the world is becoming and how necessary it is to understand that it's complex, which means, again, irreducible, related together, can't be separated apart. You're going to have to just live with it, whether it's comfortable for you or not. Now, this story illustrates, I think, a really good way to illustrate this for you, and this is my Vulcan death grip story. I gave a TED talk a couple months ago on how the Vulcan death grip changed my life. So if you saw it, sorry to hear it again. But this idea is really based in the premise behind some of this book. Okay? So I'm 12 years old, and I come home from school, and the routine coming home from school was dropping off my bag at the door, grabbing a snack real quick, and heading out the back door to the alley. I live in an urban area. So to the alley to play stickball with my buddies. And that's what we did. And so I dropped my bag, head to the kitchen, except my mom is standing there at the door this time to tell me that I can't go play ball this afternoon because I didn't do my chores. And because I didn't do my chores, I had things to do. You know, I couldn't go play. So that upset me. I mean, I'm 12 years old, right? The boys are waiting on me. I've got people to see, places to go. You know, I'm an important dude. So I didn't like the fact that she said I couldn't go play ball. So I gave her the hand. You know, I was like, whatever, Mom. You know, rolled my eyes, the tone of voice, everything I'd kill my teenager for now today, you know, is what I did. And I gave her that. Now, my mistake was not understanding or not knowing that my dad was home. Okay? My dad was home. He was never home after school. Today he was home, and he was in the kitchen listening to this whole thing. I didn't see him there, know he was there. So I went over Mom and kind of headed towards my room or whatever, and just mad and upset, and life's not fair, you know. And he comes running out of that kitchen as fast as he could. Now, the Vulcan Death Group was important because my dad was a huge Star Trek fan. Okay, old school Star Trek, the real Star Trek, no new generation crap. Okay, the real stuff. Okay, James T. Kirk, you know, Mr. Spock, Sulu, you know. And so growing up, he would practice the Vulcan Death Grip on us. It was always a game, and he had it perfect. He comes running out of that kitchen quicker than I've ever seen him move ever in my life, and applies the Vulcan Death Grip. Just boom, right there. You know, immediately. My arm starts shaking, you know, my leg, I feel like my feet are tingling, my legs. He's, all right, you found the nerve, Dad. Funny game, good job. You know, you got it, you win this time. And he walks me over to the wall, leans down, gets right nose, I mean, he's 2 inches from my nose, right in my face. And I realize, oh, something's. He says to me, don't you ever talk to my wife like that again. Now, what was interesting, I got in trouble lots. Okay, it wasn't that. It's the fact that I remember thinking, he said, wife. He said, don't talk to my wife like that, not don't talk to your mom like that. That blew my mind, because I consciously remember thinking, he didn't say mom. Something's different. This isn't right. He didn't say mom. He didn't say mom. Oh, he's changing the rules here. This doesn't compute. Wait a second. She's not your wife. She's my mom. You know, wait a second. This isn't right. He's got me there against the wall. He's leaning into my face. He says, if you ever talk to her like that again, we'll kill you. And nobody will know you're gone. Because we can make another one that looks just like you. And that's my dad, I missed that part, you know. Okay, funny dad, ha ha. Will you really kill me? You know. But I remember thinking, and that whole time echoing in my brain is, he didn't say mom. He didn't say mom. That fundamentally changed. I didn't change overnight and become a saint the next day. I had teenage years to go through. Okay, but what he was essentially telling me was, son, if you like that Plato lesson. Son, if you want to make it through your teenage years in this house, you want to navigate your life successfully and get out when you're done and alive when you're 18, you better understand something. And that's that the way we relate in here isn't just one dimension. It's not just you and your mom. This woman who you've been interacting with, yeah, she's your mom, but that's not just all she is. She is my wife, and I have a say in how this is going to go. Whether you think it's right or not isn't the point. Her momness and her wifeness are tied together. You can't just treat her like your mom. You might think you could talk to your mom like that, but you cannot talk to my wife like that. Yes, sir. Got it. And I remember, I never did go out and play ball. And I remember sitting in my room, which was the other problem. I had to go to my room because the reason why this was a big deal, not doing my chores, because it was a Tuesday. Tuesday is trash day. So if I didn't take out the trash, then so that I wouldn't forget the next week, my dad would bring the trash in and put it on my bed. Okay? So a week's worth of trash outside, and so it worked very well because I didn't forget. Okay? But so I'm in my room cleaning up, and I remember thinking, by the way, yeah, you can use that one for your kids too. That's a good one. Okay? But I remember thinking, you know what, if this situation repeated itself the same way, and it was my grandpa who was there, he would have said, don't talk to my daughter like that. And if it was my uncle who was there, and it played out the same way, he would have said, don't talk to my sister like that. And I went through several other friends and bosses, and I remember thinking, holy cow, this is crazy. And this idea, that's where complexity came from. It's this woman, and if I just relate to her this one way, I'm going to miss it. And we've got to start thinking in the world in that complexity difference. We've got to start realizing that momness and wifeness and studentness and sonness and daughter, they're all tied together. And if we want to really make an impact in the people around us, we've got to start seeing things differently. We've got to understand they're not just students. They're not just this. They have other things that they care about that impact who they are. And if I want to connect to them and get them to do what I need them to do for the company, for the school, for the organization, whatever it is, I've got to connect with them on these other levels also. And when I start to do that, you'll find great influence. All right, the next thing here, the enigmatic part. Okay, there's a new 911. Okay, this new 911, and this is comes from actually a scripture verse in the Bible, Ecclesiastes 9:11. It's this idea of things not being fair. Again, this isn't a Bible talk, but I think it's very important because this is ancient wisdom that a lot of us really don't necessarily understand. Solomon, who is credited by anybody to be one of the wisest men that ever lived, said this. He said, the race isn't always to the swift. He said, the victory isn't always to the strongest. He said, wealth isn't always to men of wisdom, and favor isn't always to the most talented. Time and chance happen to everybody. In other words, what he's saying there is things don't make sense. Sometimes the fastest guy doesn't win the race. Logically, sequentially, orderly, the fastest guy should win the race. And we build a world. We live in a world in our minds, and we think culture, society is a world in which things that are supposed to happen do happen. And guess what? Things that are supposed to happen don't always happen. Working hard, studying hard, getting good grades doesn't mean you're going to get a great job at a Fortune 500 company when you're done. It used to be, maybe that was true, but not anymore. Things that are supposed to happen don't always happen. That's an enigma. Why? Why do these things happen? And we've got to understand, if we embrace, again, having a discerning mind, understand things are complex, things that are supposed to happen don't always happen, we're going to handle the world and problems and stress way better. The next one, after enigmatic, was rapid. And again, things change at such a quick pace anymore. It's one of the major obstacles that I talk about in this book to contextual intelligence, the rapid pace of change. So the bad news is things are changing and change quickly. The worst news is they change way quicker than you think they're changing. And if we think for a minute that what I did yesterday will work tomorrow, you're already behind. So because the world is rapid, they're always thinking about, all right, what is it different that I'm going to be expected to do tomorrow that I'm not doing today? And if you embrace life that way, you're going to have a level of discernment that no one else has. The fourth thing is nuanced. Okay? And the nuanced world is again, kind of this funny thing. Something that's nuanced means it's very hard to differentiate between. So I do a lot of work with healthcare systems. One of the things that I've noticed over 20 years of being an athletic trainer and thousands of sideline injuries, calling ambulances and things like that, is when an ambulance comes and there's an emergency situation and a patient needs to be transferred to the hospital. One of the questions that's always asked is by the EMT drivers is, what hospital do you want to go to? And I've never had a parent give a specific hospital. They always say the closest one. They always say the closest one, or whichever one my insurance company covers. Okay, it's the other one. But the reason is because the differentiators are so nuanced anymore. Now, if you talk to the employees at a particular hospital, a particular organization, they'll tell you what differentiates them from their competition, because they're just drilled into them. But the people who are using the service, a hospital is a hospital. They don't really differentiate. That's the nuance piece. Their life is so nuanced. There are so many little things that are subtle that distinguish one from another. You're going to miss it if you don't pay attention. So again, the discerning mind is one that understands what makes something different between something else is going to require closer attention on my part. closer focus on my part. And when we begin to think that way and begin to look at some of those things in a new way, we'll realize, you know what, I'm going to have an advantage over other people because I'm going to see things that other people are missing. This is a better company because. This is a better student because. And what are the nuances? They pick up on this and that. And you could have a conversation at dinner and somebody says something or doesn't say something. And you notice they didn't say that. And you pick up on the nuance. That means this or that or the other thing. Okay? So that's what that is. So those are the elements of discernment. And my time is gone. Apologize for that. Because there's my book, it's an endorsement for that. But I want to just take a minute. I know, again, we've got maybe 2 or 3 minutes left of time here. But does anybody have any questions or comments or anything you want to talk to me about? Yes, sir.
So, where you said a lot of people get new creative ideas, when they're at rest,
right?
Pretty much. But I find that a lot of times people create unique ways of addressing a problem when they're right in the middle of the problem, right when they're in that chaotic moment where they need to come up with a solution right away to figure out whether it's at work or on the sports field or whatever. Do you talk about that at all?
Desperation is the mother of invention. I mean, that's basically what it is. What's interesting about those situations you're pointing out, in the middle of a chaotic situation, one of two things is either happening. Either one, they've already given up. And giving up is, I mean that in a good way. Okay? They've given up, they don't think they're past it. Because again, what hinders us is the reliance on our past experience. So when you're in that chaotic, hectic situation and there's a deadline that's in front of you and your experience isn't there, it just doesn't exist or you can't remember, then you've given up on experience and you become desperate and try new things. That's one of the situations. The other situation is typically when that happens, it's a team-based approach. Somebody else is there with them and they can draw on multiple years of experience, a synergistic effect between different people's backgrounds and experiences. So yes, I believe that's true, but it's the same phenomenon happening where they've given up on relying on the past, relying on experience only, saying, okay, what can we do? And they collaborate together, or they just go into these crazy imaginative modes. Now, there are organizations that do this great. I mean, you read about Google and Zappos and Yahoo, and some of these companies are the best companies on the planet to work for. Why are they the best companies on the planet to work for? Because they found a way to bring 3D thinking into the workspace. You don't have to take time off to take your kids to the dentist. There's a dentist office at the corporate office. You bring your kids to work every day. You know, you can, and they understand that people live their lives and they abandon the work-life balance problem that we're all trying to figure out. Well, let me just tell you, it doesn't exist. It's a human false construction, the concept of work-life balance. It's work-life integration. Okay? And this is what Google has capitalized on, for example, is they're able to create an environment where people are thinking about life at work and thinking about work at life when they're living life. And they tie these 3 elements of time together and they have these brilliant creative ideas in the office. So you've got to create an environment to do that. Most of our organizations and the corporate cultures we've created do not endorse that kind of living in life. So we have to be drifting off to sleep before the great idea happens, or something like that. So thank you for that question. That's a great question, and hopefully that answers it. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about working what's working. How do you determine what piece to break?
Here's the beautiful part of that. It doesn't matter, and I'm not ignoring the question. I seriously believe that. Because again, if you've got all these things there, just pick one. Just pick one and break it, and it will affect. If life is complex, like I'm saying it is, it's not going to matter because it's going to affect it all. And then while you do that, you're going to have to look back and say, okay, how am I going to re-put this together? Okay. So based on that reality, my recommendation is break the smallest thing possible and see what happens. And if that doesn't really get the juices flowing, then the next biggest thing, and on up the ladder. But I sincerely believe that. Just pick something. It's like my leadership philosophy. You know what? There are 100,000 leadership philosophies out there, leadership theories. And everyone's arguing about which one's this, which one's better, you know what? I'm going to let you know the secret. It doesn't matter. Pick one. If you pick one and just become consistent with it, it's like diet and exercise. You know, it's not going to work the first day. Be consistent with it and it will work. Pick a leadership theory that you like. Who cares if it's got valid research and all that? Just pick one that appeals to you, implement it, and do it, and you'll find you'll get positive results from it later on. But you just got to do it, and that's, well, we don't want to do it. So, well, we make excuses. I'm looking for the best one, and this one doesn't really have that, but this one dresses it. And that's just all games you're playing to avoid what you really need to do. Yes, ma'am?
You talked about a lot of concepts to where you have to essentially shatter the paradigms that we've had built, that society's built through us, our experiences built through us, to identify where you stand in this. Like, for example, with the bedfellow matrix that you discussed. You have to identify who you are to other people. What do you think is the best step to move forward to begin to shatter those paradigms that you've had built?
I think you need to, that's a great question, because let me just tell you the secret here. This is not contextual intelligence. It's a big model. There's a profile. You measure 12 behaviors, three-dimensional thinking. It's an academic concept. This is not something that you can just start tomorrow and say, hey, I'm going to be contextually intelligent now, and start tomorrow. Okay, it's a process, something you have to go through. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I'm just now starting to get it. Just now starting to be able to explain it the way I want to explain it. Because realizing, you know what, if I'm going to change the way I think, and I've been saying this for a while, and this wasn't until 5 years ago, you know what? Hey, Ange, let's go to Rwanda. You know, one of the jokes I tell people all the time is, and I've been married 157 years. And the reason why I've been married 157 years is because that's 22 years in dog years. I've been married, 157 dog years. Because I'm the guy that walks in the house on Friday and says, hey honey, let's move to Africa tomorrow. Because I never think it's going to happen. Oh, by the way, I applied for this scholarship. It's a Fulbright thing. I've been wanting to do it for years, but I never told her because, well, I'm an athletic trainer. Athletic trainers don't get Fulbright scholarships. That'll never happen for me. I'm not that smart. I'm a knucklehead. I'm making this stuff up as I go along. I tell myself. So if I apply for it, I'll never get it. So I don't want the shame and the embarrassment of the rejection and building. So I applied for it like 8 months ago, honey. Until they gave it to me. So guess what? I committed us to go. So start panicking. What's Rwanda? Isn't that where they're killing everybody with machetes on the street? Didn't you see the movie Hotel Rwanda? Yeah, I saw it. That's all. And by the way, in America, that's all we get about Rwanda. It's actually an awesome place. But that's the case. So because of that, I did the same thing with Florida. I did the same thing with Texas. I did the same thing with Australia coming up here this summer. So because of that, that's the kind of guy my poor wife married. I got 157 years of credit to my task here on marriage. But do something. I'm very serious. Again, I'm not telling you to do something that I haven't done. Pick up and move your family to Rwanda. That'll change the status quo. That'll disrupt the way you see the world. That'll change. I walked into my first classroom thinking I'm going to have a classroom like I have in the States, a PowerPoint projector, all this kind of stuff. The students will have textbooks. Nothing. I was lucky if I had a chalkboard, and if I had a chalkboard, I usually had to bring my own chalk. I don't know, the chalkboard with no chalk? Students didn't have enough chairs. There were enough chairs on campus for all the students to have one, but never all chairs in the classroom. So every day, students were walking in and out from there, caring if there's an empty chair. There'd be one empty chair in my classroom, and I'd be in the middle of a lecture, and some strange student on nursing would walk right in, excuse me, very polite, excuse me, pick up the chair and walk out and take it to their other classroom. I walked into my first classroom, it's full of desks, no chairs. The students come in, put their books down, and all left. Where are you going? We gotta go get chairs. They just walk around and find an open chair in the classroom somewhere and bring it back in, and that's just the way it went. You got to change your paradigm, change your world. So you got to do something different. Now, maybe not move to Rwanda, but try different to work. Try this one. Try putting your socks on the other way. Instead of right foot first and then left foot, do left foot then right foot. It'll mess you up. It does. I'm like, I had a group of executives do that. I was with Fortune 500 CEOs. We're sitting in the gym, take your shoes and socks off and put them back on, and like put the right one off, or whatever you do the opposite. Right one first, left one first. They were like kids. They were laughing and cutting up. Oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is bothering me. This is really bothering me. You know, just start there. So if you pick something to break, you know, how about this? Go home with your spouse and whoever, sleep on the other side of the bed. See who gets more angry about that. Okay? I mean, mix something up. Do something like that. I mean, so those are the things you can do. Take baby steps. And then go, what about Bob? You know that movie, remember that Bill Murray movie? You know what? Take baby steps. Start there and work yourself up to more dramatic things. And then eventually, once you can get your socks on first, either foot, then you're ready for Rwanda. Thank you for that, by the way. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
This is a way of being more creative and efficient at setting goals. How about how this interacts with discussions about what values are? What's a good thing to do? These are ways to make things happen with groups more efficiently. How does that interact with, you know, doing things which, you know, 10 years later you won't think about, like perhaps the people that killed everybody in Rwanda?
Right. We talk quite a bit in the book about the core values that people use to make decisions. Now, what I skipped and what I didn't talk about is we're really not ready to do some of the things I'm recommending until you first understand your core values. And this is where we get, you know, this is actually a great conversation to have. One of the exercises I do in a full day workshop on this same topic is I'll stand at the whiteboard and I'll ask people in the group, what are your core values? What are the things that you go to make a decision about where to go, what not to go? What are those things? And I stand there at the board, and first of all, there's awkward silence for 10 minutes because I make it awkward because I'm not going to give you the answer. They look at me, and everybody's afraid to say something. And I look back around and I say, okay, listen, seriously, when you have something to do, where do you default to as I got to check with this or consult this? What is that? Who is that person? And they'll come back and they'll be brave enough and they say 3 things, and you know the 3 things. Well, faith and family and work, you know, those are the 3 most important things, and those are the things. Really, those are what guide your decisions. Honestly, truly, when you've got to make a gut decision, and my students do this all the time. And I say, all right, here's the deal. Bring me in your checkbooks and bring me in your credit card statements tomorrow to class, and I'll tell you what your values are. Because what your values are is what you spend your resources and time doing and focusing on. They kind of chuckle and laugh and they realize, okay, so my core value is me. Right. You're right. That's your core value. It's you. So what makes you so all right, let's work from there. So this idea, they'll say honesty, they'll say integrity. I have the opinion that core values change, and that's questionable. That's argument. I mean, you can argue that. But I've said it a lot of times, core values are transient. Now, I'm not talking about integrity and character, but things that are important at certain times. Like, for example, family was always important to me, from teenage all the way now. But my concept of family has changed dramatically. Since I'm 16, my family was mom and dad, brothers and sisters. Now that I'm married with my own kids, in-laws, you know, nieces and nephews and that kind of thing, family means something completely different. The value is still important, but the meaning of it has changed dramatically over time. And that goes to your point of, well, you know, the Rwanda thing in 10 years down the road. That's one of the things we've got to come to terms with. You've got to answer, what are your values? What drives a decision? When you have an opportunity to evaluate something, or an opportunity to pursue something, how do you know what to do and what not to do? What do you say yes to and what do you say no to? And what is the background information behind that? You have to know that first. And once you get that, you're ready to make some of these bigger decisions. But its foundation is understanding the core values and what you're making the decisions. The other big mistake we tend to make with values is because values are personal to us and you know how important they are, we make the faulty assumption that my core values are everybody else's core values, and that's just not true. And you've got to start seeing things from those lenses as well. When you do that, it creates a dynamic that's way more open communication, more creative, as you mentioned, as well as, but the bigger part of even the creativity piece is when you start doing that, you get buy-in from the people around you. Because when they really believe you're interested in their core values too, you're going to have a friend for life, somebody who's on your side to promote what you want to have done. And you get somebody, you move that from anywhere in the box to the ally box. Thank you for that question. Anybody else? Okay, I guess we're done. Again, this is not a shameless plug for the book. It is, but it's not. It's been self-published for the last 3 years, and I've been doing great. But I've actually just signed with a book publisher who's going to take it global, and it's blah, blah. I'm really excited about it. But they're doing hardback, and it's going. I actually signed the contract just this weekend. So these are the last chance you get to get them for $20. Otherwise, they're going to be $36 hardback in the bookstore. So if you want a copy now, they're only $20. So thank you.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. As he said, there's books in the back of the room. We'll be back there in just a few minutes. Cash, credit card, and this is just a little something to remind you of your time here at the university. We've
Thank you
enjoyed
very
having
much.
him for 3 days.
Yeah, it's been fun. You guys are great, by the way. I don't know if you like me, but I sure like you guys.